This is section 2.1, Slope-Intercept Form, and now at the bottom of page 59, where we've already taken some slope notes, we're going to take some Slope-Intercept Form notes. I want you to write down what Slope-Intercept Form is, and it's just one way to write an equation of the line, specifically when we have that y equals and then mx plus b, where m represents our slope, which is that rise over run as we move from left to right. Remember, the rise can be positive or negative depending on if we have to move up or down as we go from left to right. And then the b will represent the y-intercept of the line. And the y-intercept is where the line touches that y-axis. So I have a little diagram for you guys, and you see that pink line. Well, the y-intercept is going to be where it touches the y-axis, and that's right here at 2. Just a little example of the y-intercept would be positive 2. Now turn the page, and let's jump into example 1. We are actually going to change the problem in your workbook, and instead of it being negative 3/4x minus 5, change it to a plus 5. So big idea right here. Change the problem to be a plus 5. So we're going to go into that minus 5. You're going to change it to be a plus 5. And now we can fit this line on our graph. You also need to, real quick, draw an x and a y axis in that little grid that they give you. So down the middle, draw a y-axis, across the middle, draw an x-axis, and label those so you don't get confused. Out to the side, I've given you 3 steps of how we're going to do this. Those would be worth writing down. That way you can reference it later in your practice and as you start study for a test that might come up in the future. Again, slope-intercept form is how we write y equals mx plus b. It's one way to write an equation of the line. And if we are given the equation, like we are here in this problem, and we're asked to graph it, we've got 3 things we need to do. And the first thing is identify and plot the y-intercept. So if you are looking at this equation, we know that the y-intercept is the thing that's on its own, that plus b out to the side, not connected to the x. So in this problem, our y-intercept is going to be that positive 5. Because it is not connected to the x, it's the number that's not connected to the x, and that means that my y-intercept is on the y-axis at positive 5. So we find positive 5 and we plot that point. So we did step 1. We identified and plotted the y-intercept. Now step 2 is identify the slope, and then we're going to use it to actually find another point on the line. So we know the slope is the thing that's connected to our x. It's like right next to that x. So here, the slope is going to be negative 3/4. And if we remember that slope is rise over run, that negative 3 means we're going to go down 3, and then we're going to go over 4. Because remember, we go left to right. So I'm going to start at that y-intercept because that's a point that I know on the line. And I'm going to go down 3, go down 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to go over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to plot a point right there. So we did step 2. We identified the slope and we used it to find a second point. And now that we have 2 points, we can do step 3, final step, draw a line between the 2 points. Reminder that a line extends for forever and has these very important arrows at the end. We're not drawing a line segment between the 2 points. We don't just connect the dots and stop. We got to keep going on either side. And that's how you would draw a graph from an equation. Now let's go backwards, and in example 2, they give us a graph and we need to write the equation, which if you guys notice is the same 3 steps, just kind of backwards. So our first step is we want to identify that slope. They give us a graph with 2 points and we need to find the slope. So we need to look at these 2 points and count what is the rise over the run. That's what we want to find. We want to find the slope in the graph. So let's count. We go from left to right. So we start at this leftmost point. We go up. 1, 2. So my rise is up 2. What's my run? 1, 2, 3. We moved over 1, 2. Yep, we moved over 3. So that means my slope is a positive 2/3. That is my slope. Step 1, find the slope. We totally did that. Step 2, look at that graph and pick out what is the y-intercept. Reminder that y-axis is my up and down. Where do we cross that y-axis? This point right here, which if this is the origin 0, then this is -1. That means that my y-intercept is at -2. So my b value is going to be -2. And we got that from looking at the graph. So there's your little note to self. How did we do that? We looked at the graph. It touches the y-axis at -2. And then step 3, put those pieces together to write the equation. We have our format is y equals mx plus b. We now know the m and we know the y. So I can write that as y equals, my m is 2/3 x plus, and that b is -2. So I actually don't need that plus because that's just -2. And now I did it, where 2/3 is my m and -2 is my b. Last example is still writing the equation of the line and slope-intercept form, but this time it gives us 2 points. And you got to think, oh, if I have 2 points, what can I find? I can find the slope. And then you're like, whoa, how do we find the y-intercept? That's what I'm going to teach you guys. So our first step is going to be to find the slope, and I've written our slope formula there, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Let's actually go through and label our points so we don't get confused. All right. So this is my first ordered pair. This would be my second ordered pair. So that means that 5 is my first x, x1. 4 is my first y, y1. -1 would be my second x, x2. And 6 would be my second y, y2. Let's substitute those values in to find this slope. y2 is 6, minus y1 is 4. x2 is -1, minus x1 is 5. We do those calculations. 6 minus 4 is 2. -1 minus 5 is -6. And what do we see here? We see 2 over -6. I see that I can simplify that. I can divide both of that by 2, and I can simplify that fraction to be -1/3. And that's going to be my m. Notice how technically the denominator was the -6, and I wrote it in the numerator. That's because it doesn't matter where we actually apply that negative as long as the fraction itself is negative. And I like to put that negative in the top because that makes me think, oh, the line goes down, and then it goes to the right 3. So we found our slope. Now we need to find that b value. We do not know what this mystery b value is, and we need that to write the equation of the line in slope-intercept form. We need the y-intercept. Well, thankfully, we do know the slope, and we can use a point on the line like 5, 4. We can use the point 5, 4, where 5 is an x value, 4 is a y value. Since that point is on the line, we can use it to find our b value. And what I mean by use is we can substitute those values in for x and y to where we know y, we know m is our slope, we know x. And from what we know about solving equations, if I knew and could substitute all of those values with numbers, then the only thing I don't know is b, and I can use my equation knowledge to solve it. That's what we're going to do. The y value is 4, so I'll write 4 equals m is -1/3 times x, which is 5, and then we have plus b that we don't know. So we just substituted those in. This 5 went in for x, this 4 went in for y, and our m went in for the m. Let's do that math. You can open up a calculator. You've got access to one. What's negative 1/3 times 5? Negative 5/3. So 4 equals negative 5/3 plus b. We don't know that b. What is it? Don't know. I'm going to find out. And don't get scared that that's a fraction. It's just a number. If I wanted to get that b by itself, I have to undo the negative 5/3. Well, the opposite of that would be positive 5/3. So add positive 5/3 to both sides. Again, use that calculator. What is 4 plus the fraction 5/3? And if you type it in as a fraction, it's going to give you back as a fraction. And that as a fraction is 17/3. So you get 17/3 equals that b value that we didn't know. Now, if you are not using a calculator that gives you fractions, 17/3 is approximately 5.6 repeating. So if that's what you got, then you're mathematically correct, but go ahead and write it as a fraction. We don't want to round. That b value is 17/3. So guess what, you guys? We have everything we need to write the equation of this line. We have a slope, check. We have a b value, check. Let's do step 3. Let's put those pieces together. We know that the m is negative 1/3. We know that the b is 17/3. Lots of fractions here. So if we have our y equals mx plus b format, and we want to write the equation of a line. An equation of a line is going to have your x and your y variable, and it's an equation, so it has an equal sign. We just need to replace those parts. So my equation would be y equals negative 1/3 x plus 17/3 once I replace with what I know. All right, that was 2.1 slope-intercept